Live. You're listening to Live with Men, the podcast.
So this is Men, the podcast. Naiko Baruti and Nadia. We're back. Again, as always, thank you kwa kila mtu ambaye anachukua muda wake kutusikiliza. We appreciate that. Reach out and then tuambie unachotaka kutuambia, and then we'll see kama what we can do either to discuss zaidi vitu tunavyotaka kudiscuss au kama unataka kuwasiliana na Nadia. I always say, Nadia, I'm your biggest plug right now. But kama unataka kumpata Nadia, she's now on Twitter at Mind Matters TZ. Mind Matters TZ. Both Twitter and Instagram, and then kwenye bio yake kuna link ambayo ukiingia kwenye link it definitely take you kwenye website yake, and then unaweza kuwasiliana naye kwa urahisi from there. As always, hataki kutoa namba yake ya simu, so hatutoi namba ya simu. Don't slide on my DM ukaniomba namba ya Nadia ya simu. I am just not going to do that.
What's the biggest flag?
As the biggest flag, you don't give out your number. Yeah. You don't hutaki watu wajue supplier wako anapatikana vipi. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I need to continue being the plug. You good, Nadia?
Yeah.
And bwana leo we are joined with Princely Glorious. That's a very unique name, Princely Glorious. Yeah. First of all, for starters, Princely.
Yes.
Where did that? You know, talk about.
So the name is from my parents, my dad and my mom. I think actually my dad, he told us he'd been praying for us with our names even before we were born.
Alikuwa anasaidia majina.
Nice.
And so he, the name is kind of was a prophecy for us, and I've not done enough to live up to it, but we're on our way.
So yeah, Princely is with us, and then he's doing a lot of things, especially kwenye creative industry. Najua kwa watu ambao mnamfuatilia mpo Twitter na Instagram, wana page ambayo inaitwa Ona Stories.
Yes.
So they do a lot of interesting stuff. So you can check that out, Ona Stories. And again, I'll be your plug. When you want to do some activities, especially on social media production, social media work, storytelling, basically storytelling. I know you guys did the whole AR thing, artificial.
Yes. Augmented reality, and virtual reality. So yeah, we're pioneering the future of storytelling in Tanzania and in East Africa as well.
Nadia. You never know what my pattern, storytelling, you know that. So yeah, tuko na Princely bwana na leo tunataka tuzungumzie kitu kimoja very interesting. Being a man in the age of feminism.
Definitely. Yeah.
But for starters, what I would like to know, Princely,
yes,
your take on feminism. And Nadia. Yeah. I know Nadia has a very strong view kwenye swala zima la feminism, but I would just like to know, what's your take on the whole concept of feminism?
Yeah, so feminism, I think the background of feminism, when you read people like Bell Hooks, and more recently you read people like Chimamanda, what feminism is at its essence is just a call for us as the world to view men and women as equal, right? And I think that's just what that's what should be. We should all view men and women as fundamentally equal. Different, yes, but equal, right? And so I think when the movement began, those were the underpinnings, the foundations of the movement. What a lot of men, at least what I've seen, a lot of men have issue with the current take of feminism is that we have had over the past few years a brand of feminism that has kind of dominated the narrative that is a little more militant, a little more aggressive.
Break down for me. Break down. Twende taratibu.
Yes.
So unavyosema a little bit more militant, a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
Break it down for me. What do you mean? So
what I mean is that there's a narrative, and I'm not talking about feminism. I have to be super careful. I'm not a woman here. So
and that's the biggest thing. It's like it feels like feminism is for women.
Yeah. No, but I mean,
women believe that.
I have to be careful how I phrase it because I'm not the one who's going through the struggles women go through.
Yeah.
Right. But there's there's a narrative that has gone around, and when I'm saying a narrative going around, I mean on social media platforms, I mean in the real world with people you meet, where it's kind of anti-men, as though, there's a lot of talk of toxic masculinity, and there's definite parts of our traditional views of masculinity that are toxic, but then when the narrative becomes that anything that is remotely masculine is toxic and should be uprooted from society, then you start alienating men, right? While the original point of feminism is not to alienate men, is to bring both men and women together and say, hey, look, our societies have been crap for a very long time. They've kind of subjugated women, they've put women down. But feminism is about viewing men and women as fundamentally equal. So, I would say, that we can, if you view feminism from the lens of the equality of the sexes, then we should all be feminists. If you view this militant, more aggressive narrative that has kind of become anti-men, some people that I'm reading are starting to have a little issue with the label of feminism, but not with the values of feminism, right? So the values of equality are great, but the label then becomes, I'm a little wary of calling myself a feminist because there's so many people who call themselves a feminist who have then, kind of like bashed men and said men are dogs and men are trash, and all of that, and it's a very accepted narrative. I can call men trash, I can't call women trash. Oh, that's sexist. But
don't cross the line.
Don't cross the line. Eh? You can say women are dogs, or the other one that I can't use.
The B word.
But men are dogs, men are trash, men are shit, men are all these different. I don't know if you bleep out words. Men are all these different things. So then you start having an issue with the label, but not with the values. Yeah. So that's how I see it.
Well, Nadia usually anasema yeye ni humanist. Yes. Can you explain a little bit more on that, Nadia?
Well, I feel, as what Princely said, that the term feminism itself now has been so misconstrued. People take it and run with it with their own agendas. Yeah. So we're losing the essence of equality. The whole agenda was to reach to a state where men and women are treated as equals. All humans are created equal. And so that's where I come with I'm a humanist. Because if we're all created equal, then we can, if we think of it from that angle, we can treat each other equally. We can respect our uniquenesses, and respect our differences, but then we're equal. We're equal in how unique we are. And for me, that's what feminism was and is in its core.
The values of
the value, yes.
So I also sometimes think of myself as an equalist. Because humanism has its own set of beliefs as well. About that that are a little more agnostic, let me say. But
big words today, big words, but we get there.
Get your dictionary.
We can also break it down a little further. But so sometimes I think of myself as an equalist in the sense of it's the same values as feminism's basic values of men and women are equal, that human beings should be evaluated on rather than their gender or their race or their upbringing or whatever. They should be evaluated by what they bring to the table. They should be evaluated on their merit, right? So meritocracy rather than...
Another big word.
Meritocracy, basically that if you have the merit, you should get the job.
You should have
the merit, you should be valued according to what you're bringing to the table, not any label in particular.
So let's get back to what we now that you mentioned it, for sure, kuhusiana feminism, equalism or humanism, whatever.
As long
as we get the point going. Now let's talk about kitu ambacho tunazungumzia leo, which is being a man at this modern age of feminism. Do we think kwamba based on what you've just said, what both of you meongelea hapa na concept of feminism, do you think it is becoming a little bit harder kuwa mwanaume katika modern society ambayo inafuatilia na inashikilia sana swala zima la feminism, which is a good thing, or based on the value concept zima ya feminism ilipotokea. Do you think it is making a little bit harder for men now to live in this society, Prince?
So I wouldn't say so I've spent a bit of time reading about historical views of men. I've spent some time asking and kind of observing people like my dad, people before him, etc. And definitely the world was very different if you were a man 100 years ago than it is today. The largest difference has been women in the workforce, right? That's probably been the biggest positive change in gender relations, where in the past we had primarily men working and women staying at home and doing the domestic stuff. Then we had this big shift with the suffragette movement, the feminist movement, and getting women to work. Now, what this did is that it changed men's traditional role as the provider, right? Where it was just your expected role. It was abundantly clear that as a man, you are the provider. That is your job. You provide, you protect, you preside. Because you provide and protect, you also preside, right? That's your traditional masculine gender role, right? With women entering the workforce and making huge strides there, with them proving to the world that, hey, look, we can do the job just as well as men, right? If not better in certain instances. That role of the man as provider has been changed in a sense, right? Where still, and this is a really weird dynamic, because still we have society kind of expecting men, at least in the Tanzanian context, we have society kind of expecting men to be providers, right? But then we have this unprecedented or never before seen, 100 years ago, we didn't have this phenomenon of women also being able to provide for themselves. So in a sense, men are getting these mixed messages from society and from women, where they're being told, I still expect you to pay for us when we go out for a meal. I still expect you to open the door and do all these chivalrous things. Chivalry is dead, but but I still
chivalry is not dead.
I still expect you to kind of have these traditional roles, but at the same time, no, you don't do some of these traditional things. Don't have some of these. So it's
conflicting.
It's a bit conflicting for men, and so as a man, you kind of have to center yourself around yourself, in a sense that you have to think about, hey, what am I bringing to the table? If I have a partner, for example, what am I bringing to this partnership? Because your traditional role, where you would just be assumed that you're the provider, it's a little more complex now, right? Maybe you have to provide more than just money and more than just food. Maybe like your previous episode, you have to provide emotional.
You have to be the emotional as well.
So the roles are changing. I don't know if it's harder, but the messages are definitely a lot more mixed than they were 100 years ago, when things were a lot clearer. If you're a man and you're a woman, these are your societal expectations.
Nadia, do you face? I mean, you're a therapist, so when it comes to do you find people who are dealing with this thing or struggling with this thing?
Yes and no, but mostly yes, because we all struggle. But yeah, it is a theme that pops up. But yeah, no, these roles, these shifting roles, changing roles, are really things that both men and women struggle with, because it's like there's this cognitive dissonance. There's this battle in ourselves.
Big words day.
Yes.
Big words day. You guys are killing me today.
There's this constant battle, because as men, you've been raised you're raised observing other men. You grow up to learn how to be a man by observing men. You can't observe a woman to know how to be a man. You know, so you're growing up looking at this generation that came from a different time than where you exist today, and that's how you learn on how it is and what it is to be a man. But then the meaning or what it takes to be a man now is slightly different to your grandfather or your father or the men that have lived before us. And women, same thing. They look up to other women, their mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and etc., who've lived throughout time to learn how and what it means to be a woman. But then we're also very intellectual beings, and we learn what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman now in this time frame. You know, with all these movements, with all this equality and freedom and all these other beautiful things that are happening now. And then that's where the struggle comes. It's because what I've learned from childhood, what it is to be a man, what it looks like and what it feels like and what it should be, is different to what I'm kind of observing, reading about and seeing now. So there's this constant battle. And for women, the same. You know, they're raised seeing or being told that you're supposed to be taken care of, and you know, men are providers. They see that their fathers are providing, and etc. So, but you grow up and you learn for yourself that okay, I can be a breadwinner too, and I can put the food on the table, and I can be the security, blah blah blah. So there's this battle that okay, this side of me who's learned unconsciously and consciously from childhood what it is to be a woman, and this space where I am now, where I've learned consciously what it is to be a woman
through my own lived experience.
Yes, they're conflicting. So there's a battle there, and I think that's where most of us have trouble, is because there is an internal battle. We're often either lashing out in our physical real life context, or we're withdrawing altogether because we don't really get what's going on. We're confused internally. Basically, in a nutshell.
Which is the big word, the cognitive dissonance that you began with. Confused internally.
You couldn't have said that.
No, big word translation.
Thank you.
Services.
Thank you. I can't afford you for that. I can't afford you for that service. But so, what both of you have said, najaribu kutuweka katika context yetu ya Kitanzania, kibongo kabisa. Do you think any issue ambayo both wanaume wote Tanzania wanapitia, au is certain few ambao tuko urban, labda tumesoma, we exposed na vitu kama, do we feel kwamba it's a struggle ambao hata wanaume ambao wako nje kidogo ya urban setting na yet they experience the same thing?
So a lot of the work that I do is telling stories that kind of explain things, right? So I love a lot of what I'll
shout
do.
Out to Ona Stories.
Shout out Ona Stories. OnaStories.com. So a lot of what I'll do is, you know, basically give you a historical context and kind of explain things. We've got to remember that globally, before we even bring it back to Tanzania, globally, the suffragette movement, which is kind of the thing that kick-started women in the workplace.
So for what?
The suffragette movement, which is the mother of the feminist movement.
Go Google that. Go Google that.
Started, you know, around 1903, so roughly 120 years ago, which in the context of human history, it seems like a long time ago, but in the context of human history, which is thousands upon thousands of years, is not a very long time ago, right? So we kind of forget that this is a fairly new development in human history. This role of women becoming viewed as equal, especially when it comes to providing and breadwinning, is a fairly recent development in the grander context of human nature. Now, when you bring it back to Tanzania, it's even more recent, right? Because our generation, I think all of us in this room are kind of the same generation. Our generation is probably in Tanzania the first generation where this kind of applies. Our mothers also maybe were that transition period where they started working, but definitely most of us, our grandmothers did not work office jobs. Right? Our grandmothers did not consider themselves breadwinners in any sense of the word. Did not, so we are one or two generations in, right? And that's in the urban areas. which is the question you asked. In the rural areas, it's even a little more complex, or like a little less, like the change has happened even more recently, right?
Yeah.
Where men have still, as much as 10 years ago, were still considered, and even in some cases up to today, were still primarily the breadwinners who go out and work, and women stay home and do the domestic jobs, and they do the care work, and men do the whatever. There's really good arguments right now, which is kind of like, I'm going on a tangent here. There's really good arguments right now about that because men kind of designed these social systems that we kind of live in a sense, we didn't value care work as much as breadwinning work.
Yeah.
Because if we did value care work, we would be paying women, even in the traditional roles, we would be paying them just as much as men were being paid for going out to look for food, right? So in Tanzania, in the Tanzanian context, I don't think it's just an urban thing. I definitely, I lived in Iringa last year, and we used to do, a lot of work in the villages around there. I come from Kilimanjaro, and we did have quite a few, like my parents have work with people from really, really rural areas and in all across Tanzania, including the Hadzabe and places like that. And in what we're seeing, this changing dynamics, they're not just changing in the urban areas, maybe more concentrated, and the complexity is maybe a little more intense in the urban areas, because there's all these different influences. But even we went, I remember this is a long time ago, 2008, we did a visit to the Hadzabe, the village elders and the different people there, whether they would want their kids to go to school, etc. And the expectation was that people would say, no, we don't want the girls to go to school, etc. But a lot of what we were hearing from them is that, unajua siku hizi wanawake wanatakiwa pia kwenda shule. So even in the farthest parts of this country, that dynamic is changing, and it's a positive. It's definitely a positive change, because we're bringing more of the human population towards education, towards a better life, but it's also making it a little more complex, because the cognitive dissonance that Nadia talked about.
I've always simplified
the confused
internal
conflict of having parents and grandparents whose views on gender are very different from what you are experiencing in your own life. There's definitely complexity there, and there's definitely like an internal conflict that we all kind of go through.
So as men, how do we live? I mean, seriously, nimewasikia wote mnavyoongea vitu kama hivyo, but I'm just thinking now, because especially we can get with social media, a lot of back and forth inayoendelea is, first of all, it's funny that when some of stuff ikitokea, especially on women, a lot of guys will do us, nataka equality bwana. You should do that on your own. I'll give you an example. The other day, mvua ilikuwa imenyesha da. So this lady tweeted a picture kwamba gari imekwama kwenye madimbwi, lakini tukashindwa kushuka, ikabidi tusubiri tuombe wanaume waje tusaidie. Jamani, mnaotaka usawa, swala usawa naomba tuachane nalo. Because ingekuwa usawa, then wanaume sisi wenyewe tungekuwa raki watafuta ni gari together kwa nini? And then it generated a whole discussion. And you know how Twitter goes. Like I want to take that as an example in terms of how we are thinking right now. In terms of how we're thinking. So how do we live? And then how do we learn to coexist as well? Because that's also a whole...
Now, I think this is something I've spent some time, thinking about and reading about, and I think when we view the fundamental value of feminism, right, which is equality between the sexes, forget anything else that the label might mean to different individuals. If we're looking at it from the perspective of men and women are equal, I don't think thinking of men and women as equal necessarily means denying the differences between the sexes, right? There's one very glaring difference. I have a penis, you have a vagina. We definitely are different. But there are also biological differences, psychosocial differences, socioeconomic differences that and physical differences that you can't. That I think saying men and women are equal doesn't mean you should deny these differences, which is a very subtle thing, right?
Keep going.
Because, like you're saying, you could look at that example of women stuck in the water, something that needs probably a little more physical prowess, and they had to call on men. And then the argument there, it's very easy for someone to say, ha ha ha, look at you feminists.
That is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened.
Right? It's very easy to kind of default to that, but that's that misunderstanding of the equal but different.
But then do you think that misunderstanding in relation based on how people treat feminism?
No, definitely.
In relation based on how people
we're swimming in a pool we made ourselves.
Yeah, because now
because
feminism what become an attack against men.
Exactly.
So if there's
there are definite sections.
How it feels for most
exactly.
people.
There are definite sections of feminism that are very loud on Twitter, very loud on social media, that are extremely anti-men, right? And every single day you go online on Twitter, at least when I go online on Twitter, there's definite sections of my Twitter, the people I follow on Twitter, who I love, but they... Disclaimer. Wanajijua, wanasikiliza. But who are, certainly there's definitely this very anti-man streak of men are trash, ha ha ha, men are virus, this.
Your corona, guys.
You gotta do ha ha. Men are corona.
Men are corona. Men are the virus on this earth. Sijui nini. Kuna moja juzi nimeona watu wanalalamikia corona wakati tumekuwa tuna virus hapa miaka yote inaitwa men.
So this is traumatizing for us. We're being traumatized.
There's definite sections which then people kind of lump together and say hiyo ndo feminism, right? Ila ndio maana nasema I think hata Nadia na mimi tulianza kwa kusema hiyo level bana, ngoja tuweke pembeni kidogo kwa sasa. Niseme tuangalie basi value ya equality. Sasa ni rahisi mtu kusema kwamba kama tuko equal, si usukume gari lako mwenyewe, while kama you're closing your eyes to the differences between the sexes. And there are definite physical differences between men and women. Men are generally larger and stronger than women.
Physically,
this is a biological fact. It's not an innate. And men generally excel more at physical stuff than women. There's and this could sound controversial when I say men are better than women at physical stuff, but it's not. It's just a biological fact. Not every man is stronger than every woman in the world, but as a general rule, there was that example in soccer 10 or so years ago, where I think it was the Swedish women's team, or some women's team had won the World Cup, and they played against a professional 15-year-old team, and they were thrashed like 7-0, right? And these are guys who've won the World Cup, and just because men are a little stronger, a little faster, a little more agile than women generally. So you have the cream of the crop from one side and a bunch of literally 15 to 18-year-olds playing for the under 15s. So it's factual, right? Those differences. So in that example, kusukuma gari, it's just that these guys were a little stronger than the women.
But Princely, the thing is, based on haya yote yanayotokea, the social media discussions that went there, I feel like tuko katika point about we don't even want to listen to each other.
Yes, definitely.
We really don't want to listen to each other.
Definitely.
So it's like everybody on their own right now. Like men are sticking together and women are sticking together.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really, really bad. After a conversation about people are really on social media. People are really not taking time kuangalia na kudiscuss this objectively. You know, it has become more about you as women and you as men. And I think it all comes down to the whole concept what we're discussing today, which is being a man in the age of feminism.
Yes.
Back in the days, my understanding was as a man, piga kimya, utakika unabishana na watu.
Mwanaume unabishanaje na
Mwanaume unabishana vipi na mwanamke? But nowadays, the loudest are men. It's like now na sisi tunapigania and then tusipoongea tutasikia. You know? Tusipoongea na sisi tusikilizi. Kwa hiyo we have to speak. Na kwenye kuongea sasa ndio tunaongea chochote kinachokuja.
Nadhani ni kweli kabisa kwamba conversations zetu, I generally don't engage in those conversations. I was actually quite wary about even coming on the show and kind of
I know we've been talking about this for months. We've been talking about this for months.
Yeah, we've been discussing with Michael for months. And I was like, right? And partly it's because of how hostile these discussions can get, right? Where, essentially as a man, you could say something as simple as what I said about the physical differences between men and women, and you get barraged.
Women are weak.
Women are weak.
Yeah.
Kwa hiyo huyu anasema kama wanawake hawezi na nini.
Boycott Ona Stories. Boycott Ona Stories.
At no point did those words come out of my mouth, right? So there's definitely that hostility that you're describing, and there's definitely this sense that it's become men versus women, which is a complete corruption of what feminism was supposed to be, right? So I used to consider myself a feminist. I don't anymore, right? And it's partly because the label has become very much corrupted in a sense, where that label has come to mean this hostile anti-men, this men versus women, men are trash, men are dogs, men are virus, latest
men are corona.
So the label has come to be associated with all of this. I'm like, okay, I don't agree with that assessment of men. I don't think men are fundamentally trash. There's a lot of men who are trash. There are many times where I have acted very trash.
Yeah, a lot of women who are trash.
There's also, equality means there's also women who are trash.
Exactly.
Equality means there's also women who are dogs. Or the other word that we're not going to use.
Yeah, the B word.
So that's why, I think maybe Nadia's gone through the same thing where she says, I'm a humanist. Or I say, I am an equalist. Or, because the label has become so corrupted and anti-men, and the conversation has become very men versus women, or women versus men. So, like you're saying, this is a lot on Kenyan Twitter, for example, KOT, where the phrase "boy child" has become, a very, very big phrase in the Twitter sphere. Because, like you're saying, men are kind of feeling like they're under attack, which I think we should kind of all work towards building alliances and building bridges, which is much easier said than done.
Yes.
As humans, we kind of tend, and this is not a woman thing, this is a human thing, we kind of tend towards us versus them. That's the fundamental thing about sexism, that's the fundamental thing about racism, that's the fundamental thing about nationalism, any type of ism, segregation ism, where it's you're a psychologist, so of course you probably can speak with more depth on this.
You should,
but we kind of tend to put ourselves in groups versus out groups, where we say in group, my group is mimi, I'm a black, right? So sisi wa black ibana tupate corona. And then we start this whole hoax of blacks don't get corona, and then people start getting it and dying. In fact, in some cases at a higher rate than the other, and you're like, oh shit. This was a hoax. This is real. Or it's how historically men have subjugated women in some senses, where men say us versus them. And now it's the opposite, where some sections of feminism are us versus them, and men are trash and men are nimi, but women are saints and women are angels. And it's like, no, the reality is a little more complex than us versus them.
Wow, Nadia, how we back with the same question here. And I'm saying this because I know for a lot of people who are listening to the podcast, it's an internet thing. So most wanasikiliza ni watu ambao wana access na ambao wanaweza kusikiliza. And I think a lot of them are struggling with this thing. You know, that is why I have a cousin brother ambaye alikuwa ananiambia, you guys, so Michael Meoa, you're lucky. For us, it's really, really hard right now. You know, it is really hard. Yeah? Oh, yeah. Wewe una matatizo yako binafsi. Utanina mwingine. But his concept was... his thinking was, he thinks that it is so difficult now for him and watu wa umri wake. He's a little bit younger than me. Na watu wa umri wake kuweza even kuwa na conversation ya kawaida na women without comparison kwanza kutokea. You know? So, and I think that also tatizo kubwa ndio ilopo what being a man at the age of I always say wazee wetu kama kuharibu wameshaharibu, kama kwa wenyewe wamekwenda. Sisi hapa age kidogo tunaona mambo yalivyo, so some of us tunaweza tukajaribu, lakini kwa wanaokuja chini huko it's even worse for them because now you're in a place ambayo mtoto wa kike na mtoto wa kiume wote wanapewa opportunity sawa. And then you can only excel if you're good at what you do. It doesn't matter if you're a man
afa tujawaandaa watoto wetu wa kiume kwamba unaona dunia isha badilikaga.
Because a friend of mine aliniambia kwamba all his life alikuwa amekaa kwenye relationship na wasichana ambao they look up to him. Kwa hiyo walikuwa wanafanya chochote ambacho anawaambia afanye. And then akarealize kwamba hiyo haimfanyi yakue. So now amekaa na mtu ambaye yuko free kuongea, to speak her mind of his comment. It's a challenge for him. It's a big challenge. But it's a challenge that he has to deal with. And then that is where this world is heading. Kwamba a lot of women now, they can speak their minds. They can say no. They're getting good corner officers. You know, you look at Nadia, she has her own business. So now
business kwanza ina bei kubwa.
She has a very rich business. She has a very rich business. So now I think a lot of men do not know how to deal with that. And that is where a challenge kubwa inapokuja kwenye issue we discuss leo. Because as a man unapenda kuwa leader, unapenda kuwa kiongozi na nini. And then as a leader you don't want your authority questioned. But nowadays you get women who question your authority.
Nadhani ni muhimu kuiangalia pia kwa upande wa kwamba sio tu as a man we're not prepared. I think we go back to the thing kwamba we're not prepared, and then you are getting mixed messages za bado utakuwa expected kufanya some of your traditional roles. But some of those other traditional, where basically the traditional responsibilities kama umebaki nazo, lakini zile traditional privileges zimeng'ang'ana, right? So, kwa hiyo ni kwamba privilege yako ya nani tumekunyang'anya, lakini date utalipia wewe mbwa.
Yes. You pay for the date, but
but you don't get any of the privileges you used to get for life. So of course it's disillusioning in a sense. I was fortunate, and I was being interviewed yesterday, and I kind of had time to reflect on this. I was being interviewed about my upbringing, and I was fortunate that I'm born in a family with 3 sisters and a mother, and all of them are incredibly vocal, incredibly assertive, incredibly leading ladies in their own right. You know, my mom has founded over 3 to 4 organizations that she leads. My sister has always been in leadership roles her entire life. My little sister is at the heart of the COVID thing in New York right now. She's in the medical field. She's a leading light in her own way. My youngest sister was only 15. She's in leadership positions at her school and whatever. So I've been fortunate to kind of have those models of leading women, of vocal, assertive women. I've had very many bosses who've been women. So I've been lucky in that sense, fortunate in that sense that it's not strange for me, right? It's normalized. What's meant to be normal has been normalized in my own life, so it's not a shock when I have a business partner, Tulanana, who's a lady, and she takes charge of things. And
it doesn't bother you.
It doesn't. I don't feel under attack.
You don't feel less of a man.
I don't feel less of a man that there are decisions that are Tulanana's to make in our business, and there are decisions that are mine to make in our business, and we don't view it from the lens of gender pretty much at all, right? Where it's just Tulanana is better at this type of decisions, so she makes them. Princely is better at these types of decisions, so he makes them, right? And my strengths, another fortunate thing, my strengths overlap with her weaknesses, and her weaknesses overlap with mine, so we kind of balance each other out. And it's not even about the gender thing, it's just I've been lucky to find a business partner who kind of ananiziba mapengo yangu na mimi naziba ya kwake. So I don't feel under threat or under attack that jamani mwanamke huyu hatakiwi kukwambia hivi, huyu sijui na nini anasemaje, mtatumiaje hiyo hela sijui na nini umekaliwa kichwani, you know, the whole nani, because I've not seen it modeled in my home life, I've not seen it modeled in my career or in my work life, so I've been fortunate, but I understand at the same time that there are men who've not had these models, and that they're not lashing out from a place of kwamba they hate women, or they're not lashing out from a place of whatever. It's just they've never had these models. They've been taught traditionally or observed their own family life where the father is the ultimate decision maker and the de facto leader, who his word is, you know, is final. And then you have this feminist girlfriend who's, you know, telling you when you should come back. Mungu wangu, nafanyaje huku na nini. Then you're with your boys and they're like, hey mwanangu, bwana nakupata kichwa kama nani vipi kama you know, so it's, you kind of, if you put yourself in his shoes, his struggles are very different from mine, right? Yeah. And so you understand it. That it doesn't justify it, but you understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, Nadia, what's your take from the therapist point of view?
Okay, I'll build up from what Princely said.
Yes,
and I think the most important point he had is we need to start empathizing with one another. Like, we need to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and try to think about how they're feeling and what they're going through in that context. I think the minute we start doing that, we will not have any issue with feminism. Also, feminism is basically like inclusivity. Feminism includes even the disabled. It includes all humans. It's not just about female male. It includes the whole LGBTQI. Most of us are getting caught up with the fact that, okay, feminism is about men and women. It isn't. Like, yes, it is about men and women, but it's about all of us, like all human beings under the sun. Whether you're crippled or whether you're disabled with any disability, whether you're disabled with a mental illness, that's also a disability of a form. Whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're a lesbian, you're gay, you're transsexual, bisexual, you're polyamorous, you name it.
What?
You Google it.
Big way to translate.
Hey. This is where you come in.
Oh, yeah, as the resident big word translator. Poly manake wengi, amorous manake kupendana, manake polyamorous manake you love.
Watu wanapendana na watu wengi.
Wanapendana na watu wengi. You have more multiple partners.
Wengi sana bongo. Keep going, Nadia.
So feminism is about that. It's about all of us. Now, a lot of us, we're having issues because we're caught up with, it's a fight, it's like now it's a fight.
Us versus them.
Yes, it's the us versus them. And then we've left out all these people who are already supposed to be included also. Because now it's a fight between the men and the women. We're leaving out everyone else who's out there that needs equality as well. And we're focusing on just this battle between the two of us. You know, between the men and the women. Which is, we're completely losing the essence of what feminism is. And most people, especially for today, humans are lazy. I like saying that, and it's true. Human beings are lazy. Like, I'm lazy.
Me too.
Everyone's lazy. We're built to not do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like, our brains take over all these important functions. Like, you don't have to think about your heart beating. That is an important function. But we don't even think about breathing, which is you stop breathing, you're dead. So
I really want
humans are lazy. Like, point blank, we're just.
And stupid.
Hey. Big words now it's
Something worse.
putting us lazy and stupid at the same time.
We need to be very self-aware. Self-awareness is important. Inabidi ujitambue kwamba mimi as a woman I'm insecure because of XYZ. And so maybe sometimes reactions zangu are coming from my insecurity as Nadia, as a woman.
Yeah.
Not coming from the fact from how Michael treated me or how Princey treated me. No, they're coming from Nadia's insecurities. The end. When you're not self-aware, that's when you say you're being patriarchal and you're pressing me down and you're trying to like rule over me because you're a man. You think you're better than me. No. Probably it's coming from a place where he's noticed your weakness and he's trying to assist you or is trying to cover up that weakness. Yeah. But because you're insecure or you're going through your own internal issues, you're seeing that as under the lens of feminism. What feminism is today. You're seeing it from that lens. And so that's how you're responding and reacting. And same for men. Some men have their own insecurities and have their own deficits and their own shortcomings. And so when a strong woman comes along who is outright feminist and plays on those insecurities, we retaliate. Because, hey, you're making me feel these insecurities that in any other day, I do not want them to see the light of day. And so that's how we end up attacking one another, because we're probably playing at each other's insecurities and shortcomings and all these things that are uncomfortable for ourselves. So the minute we start becoming self-aware that these are my insecurities, if someone comes along and triggers that, you are aware that, okay, they're not being patriarchal or they're not being condescending. It's just me. This is a thing I'm having. This is an insecurity that I have. And then you will be able to respond appropriately. But if you don't know, you'll just react. So I always tell people, respond, don't react. Reaction is like that. You don't think about it. Humans, we are the only species that has a frontal lobe. You know that front part of your brain? We're the only species that
I know. Biology application. We're
the only species that can rationalize. But then a lot of us do not use our rational part of our brain. We just react. We're just acting from this primitive area. Reptilian brain. We're just reacting from our emotions and all these triggers. And that's why I say we're lazy, because it takes time to rationalize. You have to weigh. You have to see what is from my reptilian brain, what is unconscious, what is my unconscious bias, and what is actually happening. You need to sit down and make those decisions. But a lot of us don't do it. We just react. We are reacting to traffic police anakunyanyulia mkono, you react to your past event ulokamatwa huko unfairly. You're like, what did I do now? You're angry. Meanwhile, utakuta tairi yako ina puncher. He's just stopping you to tell you, jamani, hey, for your own safety, change the style. But you already reacted in this negative way from your past experience. And that's what's happening today with this feminism. We're just reacting. Oh, I saw my father abused her, or whatever, she was oppressed. And then every time a man tries to do something for you, you're reacting to that experience that you witnessed. That's also true. But when we are
reacting instead of responding.
Responding takes a lot more time, because you have to sit down, weigh the consequences, rationalize, look at the pros and cons, look at what am I bringing to the situation, what are they bringing, what is the outcome I want. That's the most important. If you say, okay, feminism is bullshit, what is the outcome you want from that statement? Do you want us to not be equal? Is that your goal? Because then
if you say men are trash.
If you say men are trash, what do you mean? Do you not like your son, your father, your boyfriend? Do you not want a man in your life?
All men are trash except when I That exact
cognitive dissonance is strong.
Yeah, very strong.
Yeah, no, definitely.
All men just accept.
Exactly.
Now, no, no. We as men, we stick together. Before men are trust. Now men is what?
All that
Yeah.
from your grandfather to your father to your son that you're going to have. You know,
But
people,
in a sense, there are certain similarities, and I might say something that might sound controversial.
Keep going.
But so maybe I should pick my words.
we like
carefully.
controversial.
But there are also evolutionary, biological, and evolutionary psychological differences between men and women that also part of this cognitive dissonance that we are experiencing in today's age, and I'll break that down. So there are some differences between men and women that are very obvious. Our physiology is different. You know, my male parts are very different from Nadia's female parts, right? But then there are also psychological like underpinnings that are different in a sense. Where, for example, women reward in a dating sense, for example, women generally reward men who lead. And by reward, I mean they are more attracted to them. They are more. They give them the rewards of the dating marketplace. Basically, men are getting these mixed messages that we've been talking about throughout the show, where on one hand, society tells them men and women are equal, but then they interpret it as, I expect, like we can go 50-50. You don't have to be the leader. We can, I can lead. But the rewards go to the men who act traditionally alpha, right?
Very
the
true.
men who act traditionally masculine are the ones who are more successful in the dating marketplace.
Yani nikirahisisha kabisa ili watu muelewe.
Yeah.
Wakati ambapo wadada wanasema mambo ya 50-50 na nini vitu kama hivyo. Lakini mwanaume ambaye ukienda kwenye date anaweza akalipa.
Ndio atakaye
faidi. Let's put it that way.
So
mwanaume ambaye atalipa, atampitia dada, atamrudisha nyumbani. Na nini huyo ndio ataonekana fresh. Ingawa huko sasa hivi tunaambiwa kitu
50-50, we go that shit, tunafanya hivi. And even in terms of leading, like the relationship, right? Like the dynamics of the relationship, generally speaking, both from my own experience and from experiences speaking with other men and observing other men and observing the dating marketplace. Like I said, I'm not married like you, so I'm still out here dating a variety of people, and
he's busy.
The from my own observations and whatever, you still see that when the man kind of leads the dynamics of the relationship, things go a little smoother, right? And I'm sure there's different perspectives here, and we could have a whole argument about that. But from what I've observed, what I've read, what I've heard from other people, those dynamics of the traditionally masculine, whatever, are more rewarded. While kwa mdomo, right, we're not being told that. So there's even men who argue that that's like a shit test. Like it's a test that tuwaone wale ma-weak men eliminate.
It's an elimination.
Tunabaki na wale ambao wameng'ang'ania wanajimudu. So wale ambao wameweza kubalance out whatever's toxic about the traditional masculine roles, but kept the stuff that women kind of reward, right? So there's that dissonance as well. Alafu inafanya kwamba wanaume wanaenda sasa extreme, right? Anakuwa traditional masculine to the extreme, forgetting that when we think of I'm going to talk about archetypes, another big word, we'll break it down. We kind of forget that there are more masculine archetypes than the warrior and the king archetype, right? Because when we think of traditional masculinity, we think of a man as a king, or we think of a man as a warrior. Those two are the traditional roles that we kind of think of. These are the archetypes. An archetype is basically like a foundation of how people act, and it's a role that people play, and it's happened over many times in history that it's a type, right? So when we think of like our basic assumption of what a man is he's a king, or he's a warrior, right?
Conqueror.
He's a conqueror. Yeah. Both of these are, very, when we think of alphas, that's what we think of, right? But we forget that throughout history, women have rewarded men beyond these two roles. It's not a new thing for women to reward people who are not traditionally king or warrior. I'll give you a very good example. Think of any rock star that you know, and an artist, let's say Diamond Platnumz here in Tanzania. He is somebody that very many women find extremely attractive, right? He's not because of the king or warrior. He's not a king or a warrior in those senses of the word, but there are other archetypes. There's king, warrior, magician, lover, right? These are all different archetypes.
He's on the top of the food chain. I thought he does.
In whatever, exactly. In whatever archetype, you're at the top of the food chain. And our societies and women have generally rewarded all these different archetypes. But what's toxic or what's problematic with certain views of masculinity is where you replace like the sides of men, men who like sing with a very sultry voice. If you break down Diamond, for example, he sings with a very sultry voice and does these very feminine dance moves, right? Very feminine dance moves, but he's still considered super attractive by many sections, and maybe some people might not want Diamond, but think of any R&B singer you can think of, right? Bruno Mars or whoever. They're not your traditionally masculine men. But we forget that what it meant to be traditional masculine included a much broader spectrum of men as artists. But you are extremely competent as an artist. Men as magicians, but you are extremely competent as magicians. The new magicians today are people in tech, for example. You find somebody like Bill Gates or Elon Musk who in their own sense are completely socially inept. Like when they were growing up, for example, there are these dorks, what they would be called dorks or dweebs or whatever. Nerds. But they've gotten the rewards of our society extremely handsomely, and are extremely attractive men because they have been extremely competent magicians. What they do is like magic, man. Like they somebody's gonna take you to space. Elon Musk or Bill Gates with the computing revolution, etc. So there's masculine roles that are not what you think of as this macho warrior thing, which granted women are very attracted to, but there's types beyond that. There's archetypes beyond that you have to kind of, as a man, find what you are most naturally inclined to, and then be competent. Now, I've repeated the word competent so much because the truth is that whether it's in the age of feminism or in the old ages or back when we were hunter-gatherers, the men who were the most competent got the rewards of their society, regardless of whatever their competence is in. So I am the most competent ironsmith. Fantastic. I am the biggest, strongest warrior who can lead others into war. You got a competent man.
You look at this guy. What was his name? What was his name? Casanova.
Oh, Casanova, yeah.
He was really good at what he was
exactly. Very competent.
Very competent. They made a song about him.
Very competent lover, which is one of the archetypes of men as lovers, and there's the whole Prince Charming, whatever, and there is you can get super competent. You've got super competent kings like Genghis Khan, who up to today, I think about 5%, 1 to 5%, I don't remember the exact number, of Asian population can trace their genetics back to one man. Right? Genghis Khan. Shout out Genghis Khan.
He was the man. He was the man's man.
Yeah, he was the man's man. He did whatever, but he was super competent, hyper competent at what he did. And so as men, if you cut out all the bullshit and you cut out all the noise, right? And you're trying to look for, what should I be? Oh, feminism. Oh, there's all these things and people were under attack. It's been true throughout history that if you are a competent man, if you're good at what you do, and you are one of the top at what you do, you will get the women, you will get the money, you'll get the resources that
you'll be rewarded
by this society.
So tukirudi kwa wale wanaume ambao wanapenda vitonga. You know what kitonga is?
Kitonga is like slope. Downhill slope.
Unajua mlima Kitonga? Ukiwa unatoka Iringa, unakuja unaitafuta Morogoro. Kuna mlima
super steep
unaitwa Kitonga. So now tumegeuza kwamba kuna wanaume ambao hawapendi kufanya kazi, wanapenda kulelewa na kuangaliwa na vitu kama hivyo. Ndio nasema wanapenda Kitonga, they just slide kwenye slope pale. Do you think wa aina hiyo pia ndio ambao wanahangaika sana, kulalamika sana kuhusiana so zima la being a man?
Yani nakwambia, it is exactly true. I was reading a friend of mine's tweet about this song Susanna,
by Sauti
Sol, Nura, shout out Nura, and she was
I know Nura,
feminist on Twitter trash. But shout out, and she made a very good point about the song Susanna. And she was like, Susanna is a broke boy's anthem. Right?
Yeah,
and now you even talked about it. You even talked about it, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. Because if you look at what these guys are essentially complaining about in the song, is that, oh, Susanna, some guy who's more competent than me has taken you. Right? They didn't phrase it that way. But,
a little bit.
But why is he richer than you?
Because he's competent.
Exactly. He's better at life than you are, right? And so you're sitting here complaining instead of analyzing yourself and saying, hey, look, man, I should be more competent. Now, the competence doesn't have to necessarily be wealth. I have to maybe put a nuance there, right? The people who are just extremely physically well endowed, and that's also super attractive. There's people who are really good speakers, and that's super attractive. There's people.
Hey,
there's people.
Tukipewa link ya kipindi tutatoa namba yako ya simu.
I'm a black Anyway, so basically it's as a man, what I've been learning, right, as a man, is that I have to pick an area. And for me, I've picked storytelling, and I've picked, speaking and writing and thinking and helping people speak and write and think. And I've said, I'm going to try and be as competent as I can in these whatevers. And I've got really great support from Tulanana. I've got really great support from my sister Zoe. I've got really great support from my family, and from the clients that we get. They kind of look at you as an expert, and they kind of allow you to thrive, and so that gives you, the motivation to continue to be to improve yourself.
And
but
excel.
But as a man, if you continue, regardless of feminism, regardless of toxic masculinity, regardless of the noise around you, if you as a man decide to be centered, and we kind of talked about this in the beginning, if you as a man decide to be centered and have a locus, have yourself as the locus of your attention, all these other things follow. If you spend too much time chasing women, you don't get them. But if you spend so much time working on yourself and improving yourself, they come.
How true is that, Nadia?
It's very true.
Nothing else?
That's it.
No, it's true, because people are attracted to people who are. When you're working on yourself, that means you're more aware of yourself, and you're more able to treat me as a unique human being that I am. People who are not self-aware, who haven't worked on themselves, who aren't really putting enough time in themselves. how if you can't put in time into yourself, how are you gonna put in time for me? You know, so it's the same with love. Like people who can't love themselves and don't feel sorry for themselves or don't care about themselves, they're not gonna be able to care for another person. Because you're the first template. You know, you first tested out yourself. If you can't give all those things that you're claiming to be giving others, then it's a lie. And that's where trouble happens.
I don't know if you agree with me as a man as well. You're a married man, so tread carefully here. But
and my wife listens to a lot of these things, sometimes before they even go out.
So tread carefully here. But if you think, if you think back maybe to when you were still in the dating scene, or even if you think about your current life with your life partner, there are women that you meet who kind of challenge you to a point where you're like, oh shit, I still have a lot to work on myself. And I've recently had an experience like that, not too long ago, just last year. I had a few experiences like that where I was like, oh, hey, Princely, you thought you're not as good as you thought, right?
Yeah, you're not as good as you thought. And you need that.
You definitely need that. You definitely need that. So I've had experiences like that where it's, one or two people who you've met and there's an area of your life which you thought you had worked on and you hadn't. Yeah. And these people are kind of reminders that, hey, my brother, you're really good at all these other things, but you're not good at this one thing, and it's important to me, right? And it kind of is a kick in the balls, and it kind of like wakes you up, and you're like, hey, bro, you've still got a lot to improve about yourself. And so if you look at it from that perspective, that's like one of the tricks I've learned. That if I look at it from the perspective of I'm constantly trying to be a better version of Princely, and I'm constantly trying to be more competent. Right? I'm constantly trying to be better at something. I'm putting in the work, the 10,000 hours or whatever it's going to take for me to be one of the best in this country in storytelling, in communications, in strategic thinking, in whatever I have decided to focus my attention on. Then society will reward me with jobs, with women relationships and love and whatever, with male friendships, with society will reward you if you truly, rather than focusing on all the noise outside of you, focusing on yourself, which is a lot harder than it is. And you always have to be reminded by people outside of you, hey, mwanangu, bado kazi haijaisha.
Yeah, that is why Nadia comes to the point you always make about proper support system.
And also in that sense, how our initial reaction to people around us is information. So as Princely saw that, okay, these relationships I've been in, they kind of made me realize that, okay, there's elements of myself that I thought I worked on, but I haven't. That's basically what these human interactions are for. They're indicators to show us that, okay, you've really worked on this part of yourself and you're doing great, and it can show in your interactions. When you haven't really, and there's still more work that you need to put into yourself, you will feel it. You'll get that feedback from people. So constantly observing and looking at, okay, are men treating me in this way because they're trash, or because I allow it, or because there's something in me that I haven't really worked on. When you start looking at external reactions in a way to self-improve, then your outlook on feminism, on men, on women, on the disabled community in general, all of us will be different. Because you're looking to learn. You're not looking to criticize, judge, or point fingers. Because again, they always say when you point fingers, there's like three or four fingers or whatever. However long finger, how many fingers you have.
I'll point mathematician.
And we respect that.
And we respect that.
So there's always things that you can learn from the situation that teach you about yourself. And we need to watch it. A lot of us are Nadia to bandwagon. Some people don't even know what the whole feminism is about. I see it on Twitter. These women are acting all crazy on Twitter, or these women are like going on protests, or etc. And we jump. We don't even know what we're jumping on. Maybe it's human trafficking that we're jumping on, and next thing we know, we're being sold. You know? You are excited, mwenyewe, but you don't know where you're going. We need to stop. We need to stop being lazy.
Okay, for both of you, as we're winding up, I know this conversation could go for 2 days. Do you think, can we look at feminism and what it's doing to men as a blessing now? As in, if you use it wisely, for a lot of men, can actually take time. Now, could you find a little bit of self-actualization, self-analysis? Can we look at it from that perspective?
Yeah. So I read something recently from a man I admire and respect, who said something along the lines of, the good thing about being a man is that society doesn't even pretend to give a shit about you.
Hey, word.
Right? So
that's very. Can you run it back again?
Yeah, it's like the good thing about being a man is that society doesn't even pretend to give a shit about you, right? Because there are instances where you go online and you see, like, as a man, you put a picture, for example, and a woman puts a picture, you have all these people who like the girl, who don't like the girl. Oh my God, you look so great. Yes. Right? And nobody even pretends that they give a shit about you, right? And you could see that as a bad thing and say, oh, nobody gives a shit about me. And you could sit there and whine about it. But that's not being a man, and that's not being competent, right? If you view it from a place of self-improvement, like Nadia was saying, then it's like, okay, so the world doesn't give a shit about me, so I have to give a shit about myself. I have to work on improving myself. I have to work on becoming the best version possible, princely, that I can be. I will fail miserably many times. I will be reminded that by many people that I am still a failure in many ways, but the parts that I have selected to be competent at, I'm going to try my best to be as competent as possible. In a sense, what feminism has done, but what has been true with or without feminism, is that the world doesn't give a shit about you as a man. You have to give a shit about yourself. And feminism is just reminding me that, listen, there are parts and sections of you guys that need some work. And there are parts of masculinity that are indeed toxic. Now, don't take that message as masculinity is toxic, because that's the thing, that the message has become that being masculine is toxic. And so you end up thinking that, oh, women are saying that masculinity is toxic, so I have to be more like a woman, and then you become more like a woman, and nobody rewards you. You know what I mean? And so you kind of you're like, oh, but I thought, and so you become bitter and you become whatever. Oh, I thought if I became more like this, I would get the rewards. But no, work on yourself. Nobody gives a shit about you. Nobody gives a shit about Princely or Michael or whatever. You have to give a shit about yourself. You have to. I think you're going to bleep out a lot of these, but
probably won't.
You probably won't. You have to give a damn about yourself, and you have to improve yourself and become competent, because for me, that's what it means to be a man.
I completely agree with Princely. Like, the minute you start focusing on yourself, then even the women bashing men will not affect you. It will not touch you. You will see them, and you probably empathize with them, and probably see maybe where they're coming from and the pain that they're going through, and you better treat them. So when you start working on yourself in this sense, then it doesn't. Maybe the women themselves, they will evolve. Maybe it's a reaction. Maybe when they say all men are toxic and men are the worst, it's coming from a hurt place and a place of lack of awareness. But the minute, let's say, again, at some point someone needs to be the bigger person and put on the shoes. The big boy pants or the big girl pants or whatever. Someone needs to be that person. When we all decide, oh, we're all going to be pigs and lay around in the mud, then we're going to be pigs playing in the mud. The end. But maybe one of us pigs decides, I don't want to play in the mud anymore, I want to get out. We'll inspire other pigs to get out of the mud and start living cleaner, safer lives. I don't know why I'm using pigs, but anyway.
We get the example.
But
so men are pigs now.
I said all of us are pigs.
and the women.
Okay, equality.
Yes.
Men and women are pigs.
Better pigs than corona.
Yeah, they're better pigs than corona.
You know, so when you start focusing on yourself and you start shining the light to you and start seeing, okay, what is this telling me? What does this feedback mean for me and my growth? Then you will treat the world from that space as well, because now you're seeking to understand.
It's a lot healthier.
It's very much healthier, because when you seek to understand, then you can be, people will understand you. You know, when you're just trying for people to understand you without trying to understand them, hawatakuelewa na wewe.
I'm not gonna hear people.
Because if we're all out here trying to be understood, no one's gonna understand no one.
Yeah.
So when we start to first understand ourselves and understand others, then we will understand what feminism is.
And a lot of this is easier said than done. A lot of what I've said, a lot of what Nadia has said is easier to say than do it, but you have to do it.
It's necessary.
It's necessary.
I mean, I have this thing in my office. You guys can't see it, obviously.
Doing
but
the
work is the shortcut.
Yo!
We're always looking for shortcuts. But then when you put in the work, that is the actual shortcut.
That is the only proper shortcut.
The end, because that's the only way you'll get to what you want to achieve.
Exactly what we're saying.
Yeah. So, in short, to sum up, doing the work is the shortcut.
And to some me, I'm competence. If
Yeah.
you're a man, you want to get the rewards from our society, regardless of how you define those rewards, you have to be a competent man. Nobody wants a weak man. Nobody wants, and by weak I mean incompetent.
Yeah.
So make sure, I don't mean weak in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
So
competence.
work on being a more competent man. That's what I tell myself, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah. And for all the women listening, same advice goes to you.
Yeah.
Be better.
Yeah.
Be better.
So yeah, that's it from us. It's been full of big words, but hey, we made it through.
We made it.
Yeah, we made it through. And then you can reach us out at Men the Podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. Princely, you can reach him out. He has the company that he's leading. His own company. You can check them out at onastories.com. Lakini pia wapo Twitter and Instagram, both wakitumia Ona Stories. With Nadia, you know what to do. Mind Matters TZ, both on Twitter and on Instagram. And there, kuna link itakuweka moja kwa moja kwenye website yake. And then you can come to a fancy office. Kabandika mpaka butterflies ukutani. It is what it is. Mimi naitwa Michael Baruti. Till next time, peace out.
Men, the podcast.